Hello and welcome. So here we're going to talk about math and politics. We're starting this series where I'm going to talk about the different voting systems and different criteria for fairness. And let's talk first about what is fairness. So there are some formal definitions or criteria that are considered for fairness, but I'd like to talk about some basic assumptions first. So we've all heard the term a free and fair election. So what do those two terms specifically mean? So a free election has to do with access to voting. So we want to ensure that everyone, all the citizens, are able to vote, that it's reliably accessible to everyone, and we have rules about things like voter intimidation and other things that, to make sure that people aren't being influenced or kept away from voting. Now, understand that in the real world, this isn't perfect. So persons with disabilities, I think, are a good example. They may have a hard time getting to voting stations, or they may have a hard time filling out mail-in ballots. So it's not perfect, but we want to do everything that we can to ensure that people are able to vote and that everyone is freely able to go cast their ballot. The fairness has to do with counting. So fairness has to do with, first, that everyone's vote is counted equally. So no one's vote is weighted more than anyone else's. When it comes to elections, we are all anonymous, right? And not in the sense that we don't write our name down on our ballot, but in the sense that it doesn't matter if you're Brad Pitt or if you're just a math teacher, right? Your vote counts for the same amount, no matter how famous or influential you happen to be. And then the last thing that isn't talked about that much, but which I think is really important and is really underlying to the fairness topic, is honesty in the voting population. Are the voters lying on their ballots? And that really leads us to the next topic, because the problem with the system we have in America, where you have one vote for one person, you just say this is yes or no, right? You put your vote in, as opposed to a preference ballot, which is what a lot of countries do. You rank first, second, third, and so you have your first choice and etc. But the problem with the one vote, one person system is that people lie. So it's May of 2024 right now. We're looking at a Trump-Biden election here, and I know everyone knows someone who would really rather vote for someone else. They'd rather vote for a third party, right? An independent or the Libertarian or a Green Party, whatever. They want to vote for someone else, but they feel like they can't, because if they don't vote Republican or Democrat, they're wasting their vote. And that's a real problem, because that means that person is lying on their ballot. They don't prefer Trump. They don't prefer Biden. They're lying. And that most of the things that we'll talk about today or in this series are going to be pros and cons, right? There's this, there's that. But this is one thing that really is a problem, that people are not being honest on their ballots. So some states are moving to a preference ballot for their state and local elections, and there are countries that do this too. Australia has been doing a preference ballot system since the 1920s. For 100 years, they've been doing this. And it's working out, right? No system is perfect, but at least people are honest about what they want. And then the other thing, one of the reasons that is often given for not moving to a preference ballot is that people will be confused. Please don't insult me. Please don't call me an idiot. I am able to figure it out. I can fill out a few bubbles, or I can write some numbers down next to people's names instead of filling in a bubble. I can do it. It'll be okay. So then the formal fairness criteria that we're going to look at here are, there's formal rules or names for them, but I have paraphrased them here. So the first is kind of a head-to-head idea. So if any candidate would win against everyone else on just a head-to-head election, then they win the whole thing. Seems fair. That's why it's one of our criteria for fairness. Then we have this majority rules idea. So if any one candidate gets more than 50% of first place votes, they win the whole thing. Then we have this idea of more is more. So when we're looking at elections and we have someone who's doing well in the election, or maybe they're in first or second place, and we address those preference ballots. So the preference ballot, whoever is in last place of first place votes is usually eliminated. There's a few different systems, but that's usually what happens. They get eliminated from the race, and then we kind of eliminate that, and then everyone's second choice becomes their first choice, and then we recount. So if someone's doing well, say they're in first or second place, and we do that, and then they have more support, there's now more people like them in first place, they should do better in the election. More is more. Then we also have this idea of dropouts. So if we have people running and someone decides, hey, I'm only getting like 3.5% of the votes, this is a lot of work, I don't want to run anymore, they drop out of the race, that whoever was doing well will still continue to do well, even though someone, basically, if you're winning and a loser drops out, you're still winning. And then the last one is this idea of dictatorship. I feel like this one's kind of a gimme. Of course, we don't want a dictatorship. We have a democracy. So I feel like this is almost more the definition of democracy, but we don't want one person to be able to just decide, right? So we have a system where everyone can vote, or at least all these citizens can vote, and we don't have a single dictator who can make the choice. Okay, that's a little bit of a gimme. Now, spoiler alert, the world isn't perfectly fair. So over the course of this series, we're going to look at 5 different voting systems, and we're going to compare them to these 5 criteria and talk about what they do and do not meet of these criteria. But there's this theorem called the Arrow's impossibility theorem. It was proven by a man named Kenneth Arrow, who is an American economist. And it says that any voting system with more than 2 candidates cannot satisfy all 5 of these fairness criteria. And that's a bummer. But just because a system can't be perfect doesn't mean it can't be better. So we'll look at the different voting systems, we'll talk about where they're used in the world, and which of the criteria they do and do not meet. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the course, and I hope you will join me.